Right, guys. So welcome back to our live session, session number 5. Unfortunately, we had some power outages there on the back end, so we experienced some technical difficulties. I know that you guys did not touch that dial. I know that you all did move, right? So thanks very much for that. We'd like to take up where we left off with Mr. Halliday. He was smack in his presentation, and just when he was speaking about risk, right, this unfortunate risk, all foreseen, right, not premeditated at all, occurred. So Vaughn, thanks for that live demonstration there, right? And thanks to our IT team for the risk management that Mr. Halliday was speaking about. Then, Vaughn, I'd like to welcome you back to the virtual floor. Take it away.
All right, thank you, Nigel. And as I was saying, it's a perfect segue into our discussion in terms of risk. So we're analyzing the risk in your projects within the context of COVID-19. And one of the things you will need to make a decision on is whether you're going to continue with your projects, whether you're going to put a hold on it, slow down on your activity, or whether you're going to put a stop on your projects altogether. Now, IDB has presented the framework, which is excellent for this, such an analysis and making such a decision. So the first step in that is assessing your project capacity, your management capacity for dealing with COVID-19 within the environment. And some of the questions you want to ask, sorry, 1 second. Right. So some of the things you want to look at is if you have adequate capacity within your environment right now for managing your project. If the answer for that is no, then you're putting your workers in the community at high risk. And the project is not prepared to implement, if your project is not prepared to implement the adequate protocols and pandemic measures. In such a case, then what you may want to do is consider stopping. For high-risk projects, you may need to put measures in place to ramp down safely in terms of keeping critical workers on site to deal with any potential safety hazards to the staff or to the environment. You will need to put an adequate COVID-19 response plan in place, and you may need to seek support from your partner institutions to put measures in place as soon as possible. After you've done all those measures, you would then continue to do a further analysis to verify that those measures were adequate. Now, there may be a case where you may have some responses in place, but not all. So there may be limitations in your management capacity. The project may have some systems in place, but they may be insufficient to adequately deal with the COVID-19 response. In such a case, you may want to consider pausing your project or temporary work stoppage, or reducing the scope of your operations so that you can make improvements in your COVID-19 response. But in all cases, you need to make sure you have adequate resources and proper implementation of the health measures and safeguards. Again, whether it's not meeting the requirements or partially meeting the requirements, after you've put measures in place, you will need to make sure that you do that assessment again to verify that you have adequate management capability to deal with the project. So it's an issue of continuous improvement where you are constantly reviewing and analyzing to make sure that your response is adequate, given that there's a fluid and a changing environment. Now, if the answer is yes in terms of your management capability, that the evidence has shown that you have adequate response to manage it within the workplace, then what you would also want to look at is the other elements of risk that we'll be looking at within the COVID-19 in this framework, which is the context risk and the project risk. Now, the context risk is the risk within the environment in which you're operating. So this would speak to the level of exposure there is out there in the community, whether the rates of new cases or infection are escalating or de-escalating, the position that the health sector is in terms of dealing with the COVID-19 response. And all of that impacts directly on your project and how you can deal with your project. The other element of the risk that you will look at is your specific project risk, and that would vary from project to project. And you will look at all three elements of the risk: the management response to context risk and the specific project risk, in order to make a determination of the project risk profile, and then you may want to treat with it accordingly. Now, this framework provides with various questions that you can use to assess at both step 1, step 2, and step 3, and that would allow you to make a determination of your risk profile for your project. If it's a managed risk, in which case You're managing the risks the best way possible given international guidance that's available. Your operations are maintaining continuous implementation, monitoring, and updating of the COVID-19 measures as the situation evolves. And again, this is looking at both the context risk, the project risk, as well as your management capability. It may be a situation where caution may be needed, that your project may require further attention. You may need to ramp up or improve your implementation of health measures and safeguard to make sure that you have minimizing the risk to the workers and the associated community. In such a case, again, as I mentioned, you may need to consider pausing, temporary work stoppage, workforce reduction in order to make sure that you have those measures in place. Or if you have had unmanaged risk, which is a higher level of risk to the staff and to the community, it's a high-risk context. The project is not prepared, your work systems and work processes are not effective at dealing with the COVID-19 response. And this is a situation where you will want to put a complete stop to your project altogether, wait until conditions have improved and you're better able to manage your project activities moving forward. Now, as I mentioned, this is an IDB framework that they have developed. It's out there in the public domain, and you will go onto their website to get further information in terms of the various measures and questions you use in your analysis for step 1, step 2, and step 3 in order to help you with these determinations. So now we're going to be taking a closer look at analyzing the impact of either stopping your project or slowing down your project activities. And I found one of the best ways you can do this, and a very easy way to do it, is like if you're doing a pestle analysis. So you may look at your political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental analysis. And you could also even add into this article in terms of broadening the scope of your analysis as well. If you're looking at your political factors, one of the first things you want to look at is what is the risk of reputational damage if you have to put a complete hold or slow down in your project activity? And what is the risk to your brand, to the reputation of your company? And in dealing with this area, one of the first things you want to do is you want to make sure that you have a clear, very, very differentiated communication strategy for dealing with both your customers and the wider public at large, and you're able to respond to any queries or concerns that they have in a very concise, rapid, and prompt manner. You also want to look at the economic factors that's going to be affecting your project. So with this, you're looking at the bottom line and how that is going to be affected during this period. So you're looking at your margins, your ability to meet your loan payments, your cash flow, your labor costs, meaning that you may have to reduce the number of workers that you have on site at any point in time, and your market share. And you want to make a determination of how this is going to impact your project. Now, given that we're in a high case of uncertainty in terms of how the situation is going to develop, how things are going to move over the space of time, what you may want to look at is scenario planning, where you look at a best case scenario, look at the most optimistic. You may want to look at the most pessimistic, and you may want to look at the most likely given where you are at that point in time. And based on those various scenarios, you can then do an analysis to determine, based on what you're seeing there, how should you most likely proceed, taking into mind how things may improve or how things may potentially get worse. You would also want to look at the social impact. So how does social distancing or other restrictions limit the productivity within your organization? But within this, you also want to look at your wider community on a large, because your organization is not operating in isolation. So what is the impact that COVID-19 is going to be having on the culture, not only within your organization, but in the wider community? How is this changing demographics? How is this changing consumer patterns? How is this impacting our education? How is this impacting on income distribution and disposable income of your customers? And this is important because you need to determine how these changes is going to impact on your business delivery and therefore on your project. Because depending on the nature of the specific responses to these questions, it may mean that your project may no longer be viable in a COVID-19 environment. And it may be that you may want to defer until things have improved economically. So again, this means going back to your business case and doing an analysis to determine how dependent on these factors and how society, how your customers are being affected, does it still make sense to proceed with this project? Given where we are with social distancing, one of the best ways that you can work around this is with the use of technology. So you need to do, for example, looking at how you can implement advanced controls, analytics, technologically, tech transfer. How can you use these to accelerate your projects? How can you use to make sure that you're making the most efficient use of your resources, or even improving your decision making? You may even want to consider what is the impact of research and developing emerging technologies. Are there new emerging technologies out there that will be able to benefit your organization and help you in order to move forward? On the legal side, you want to look at, will the project disruption qualify as a force majeure? I know there would have been a lot of talk of force majeure with the advent of COVID-19. And prior to January, or maybe even arguably February, and within Trinidad, it can be considered that COVID-19 may have been seen as a force majeure event. However, given that after March, we've had local cases here, everyone is aware of COVID-19, you can no longer argue that COVID-19 is a force majeure event. It's something that is out there, everyone is aware of, and you need to make adequate measures in place for your projects and within your contracts for COVID-19 moving forward. We also need to consider what are the legal implications if you're unable to deliver on a contract, or if your partners are unable to fulfill their obligations. You need to make your relevant determinations there. But as well, you also should look at all of your contractual agreements and determine if you now need to revise your contract terms moving forward. And as I mentioned, that whole aspect of force majeure comes into play. COVID-19 may no longer be considered a force majeure event as of now moving forward. So in revising your contract terms, you need to make sure you have adequate provisions in there to treat with non-performance, or should situation worsen and your partners within your project environment are affected. You also want to look at the environmental impact. And globally, we have seen how global warming, the effects of global warming has been slowed by what's been going on in terms of the cutback in economic and industrial activity, and how that has positively impacted the environment. On a more local scale, you may want to look at what is the impact on your workforce, what is the impact on their health, their well-being, on your resource management, and even on a local scale, how has this impacted the environment, climate change, energy availability, and how you utilize energy within your organization? Are there lessons you can learn from this that you can use moving forward to improve the environmental footprint of your organization moving forward? So taking all of these factors into consideration, you can then get a better idea of holistically how slowing down or stopping your project may affect your organization, and you may be in a better position to make more informed decisions moving forward. Now, if you've stopped your project and you're looking to restart, or you have projects ongoing, you may want to look at some strategies that you can use in order to restart those projects, or in order to protect those projects to make sure that you can still complete them successfully. So one of the first things that you will need to do, given the COVID-19 environment, social distancing, etc., is that you want to make sure that you encourage clear and strong collaboration and communication within your project team. And one of the best ways you can do this is by building a very strong virtual project team environment. So you want to clarify your expectations in terms of work from home or working remotely. And I know one of the challenges that comes up with this is in terms of how you communicate. Now, I have a colleague that loves to send emails incessantly. And you know, when you're working from home, there's a tendency to communicate on every little thing in email. But what that does is that it reduces the impact, and the more important items are lost within that barrage of emails. So you want to avoid sending incessant emails. And of course, there's certain things you want to follow up in writing, but there are other mechanisms that you can use. So for example, you can utilize chats or messenger features for the simpler information to keep that communication flow going. You also want to utilize video conferencing tools, and there are lots of opportunities and avenues out there available in terms of Zoom, Skype, Hangout, project teams, etc., to make sure that you can have those virtual meetings. But you also want to make sure you're managing well, having a set agenda, start and end times, and following good meeting protocols as you go along. And then you also want to make sure that you keep that team connected, keep those bonds with your team. So still creating opportunities for virtual coffee breaks, so to say, that your project team can still socialize and have that kind of activities together. One of the other things you also want to do is you want to make sure that you create an environment where you can have centralized data management. So you're looking to create convenient, secure data collection and synchronization across your project team. So you want to have a centralized information pool. Everyone is sending the information in at the same place and is making sure that other persons can pull that information and have the most up-to-date information available. Now, if you don't have a project management or portfolio management tool to accomplish that, there are a lot of other virtual tools that you use out there, such as electronic folders. If you can log into your server virtually, there's things like Google Drive, OneDrive, or OneDrive, where you can have several persons working on a Microsoft document simultaneously. So you have that online live collaboration going on. But within this, you want to make sure that you're still managing good, proper document management, making sure your documents are dated, version numbers, and you have edit notes, so persons can always make sure that they're working with the most up-to-date document, and that you have notes so persons can determine what changes have been made. But also working within a virtual environment, you want to make sure that you're tracking items on a regular basis to making sure that nothing is being lost in between and nothing is falling by the wayside. And then the third thing you want to do in terms of managing your teams effectively, you want to make sure you have good, solid real-time reporting. So you want to establish effective monitoring systems that allows you to make as good as possible, as close as possible to real-time decision making. So you want to define suitable KPIs for your project, key performance indicators that will help you in terms of your decision making, in terms of establishing and creating a digital dashboard that you can summarize where you are at your project at any point in time, that you can then make effective decisions from there. And wherever possible, you want to utilize automated notifications or possible warning systems for potential issues. So if information is trending or criteria is trending out of acceptable standards or limits that you have set, you will have early warning notifications that you need to take appropriate action from there. Now, this is looking at managing your team effectively. Now, I want to look at a strategy for how you can protect your project within the COVID-19 environment. And I found the easy way of looking at this is by examining all the stakeholders that are going to be affected by your project. Now, we have both internal and external stakeholders. But looking at your internal stakeholders, one of the head persons you want to look at is your project sponsor, persons who own the project, persons who make those financial decisions on your project. And within this COVID-19 environment, you want to make sure that you increase the visibility of the project in terms of they have regular, very transparent reporting on the status of the project, the risks that are associated, and where you are within those risks. Now, we're in harsh financial times, and we've seen a lot of companies and organizations closing. So within this, you may need to look within your wider organization and liaise with your functional managers so that you can use cross-functional teams to see how you can improve efficiencies, reduce costs, and overall optimize the use of technology, which would then feed into making the project more effective. On the finance aspect, you may look to reduce your capital demands. So you may want to relook at your project scope across your portfolio and see where you can optimize to reduce those demands. You may also want to look at deferrals for lower priority items in terms of managing your cash flow. But one caveat I want to note here as well too is that even though you're looking to reduce your cash flow, you also need to be fair to your partners, your suppliers, and your vendors. And you want to make sure that as long as you're in a position that you make sure you pay them on time, because they are also dependent on you in order to remain in business. You also want to look at your unions and look at your unions collaboratively as a partner as opposed to adversary in a situation like this. So you want to collaborate on any measures that are being implemented and how those measures affect your staff, and work proactively with your need to make sure that your staff concerns are addressed and are addressed as thoroughly and as promptly as possible. With your customers, you want to look at your communication strategies, and you want to enhance any mechanisms for feedback so that any questions or queries that they have an opportunity to pass those on to you, so they're aware of how you're treating that, what risks there may be to them in terms of continuing doing business with your organization, and that you can assure them that your concerns are being addressed in a very practical and forthright manner. With your suppliers, you want to map your supply chain from end to end. So within this, you're looking at, again, risk management. So with your key suppliers, you want to look at what alternates you may have in order to maintain those key supplies that you need within your project. And where it comes to critical supplies, then you may even want to go a step further, as opposed to just looking at alternate suppliers, and you may want to look at possibly stockpiling those critical supplies that you must have in order to keep in business. So if there's any disruption to your supply chain, you still can continue to manage and possibly weather out that disruption. With your vendors and contractors, you may want to start to do some analysis. You may want to look at what is your financial viability to continue to complete your projects at this point in time. And then from a risk management perspective, you may want to liaise with them a little bit closer. Try to determine, do they have an adequate COVID-19 response in place in order to continue to make sure that they can provide those services that need, and to also make sure that they're not introducing additional risks within your organization at this point in time. With the public and the wider community at large, again, you want to look at your communication strategies. And this is a point in time where you may also want to look at revising your corporate social responsibility initiatives and try to determine, given where we are with COVID-19, are you actually implementing the best initiatives at this point in time? Or can you revise those initiatives to places where they're going to be more urgently needed within the COVID-19 environment? And one of the case studies that we're going to be dealing with this afternoon is going to speak to exactly to how one local company would have done that within Trinidad. Within your regulatory agencies, you want to make sure you continue to proactively monitor new regulations that are being introduced. You want to make sure that you are compliant, that your staff and your in-house and external vendors, suppliers, etc., are also compliant with those regulations. And then with your shareholders, you want to make sure that you are continuing with activities that will make your organization the most viable. So again, this speaks to looking at your business cases, reviewing all of your projects within your current portfolio, and trying to determine, do you have continued viability given the point in time? And given limited resources that you may have, both human and financial and other resources, you want to concentrate on those projects that are deemed a greatest priority and possibly even most profitable at this point in time. And you may also want to possibly defer some of the other projects until a later point in time when there is a more favorable environment. So now we've looked at how you can assess some strategies to restart and protect your projects. We're now looking at if you would have come to a complete stop in your project and you're now trying to determine a framework for how you can safely relaunch those projects within the COVID-19 environment. So one of the first things you want to do is to review the strategic objectives that you have. And these strategic objectives are going to guide your framework. So you want to collaborate with your key stakeholders to support the pace and coordination of your project environment. And again, this is looking at the context where you're restarting the key projects that are needed within your organization. So within that, you will need to look at the guiding principles. And these principles for your framework, you want to make sure you have strong leadership and decision making so that you can make proportionate as well as pragmatic arrangements, proportionate given the risk and where things have moved within the COVID-19 environment. And you're doing this whilst recognizing the impact within the wider society, the complexity that may be in place for restarting, as well as any other factors specifically unique to your organization that's going to affect the overall scope of your project portfolio. Again, you want to look at the viability of your projects, because only the projects that are deemed viable should be restarted at that point in time. Again, there are various changes that are happening within the environment, changing demographics, changing customer spending. It may not make sense to continue with some projects at this point in time. So in order to do this, your stakeholders should work together to conduct preliminary assessments of all of your pros or your stop projects, determine which ones are viable, and any changes should be identified and clearly documented before you restart. One of your highest priorities should, of course, also be safety. Now, you should not be restarting any projects until it's deemed safe to do so. And in doing that, you need to make sure that you've implemented the proper protocols to reduce risk, not only to your staff, but anyone who's doing business or coming into your organization. You want to make sure you provided clear guidance on safety issues, adequate measures for the participants, for staff. You may also need to relook at your organizational policies regarding leave and how you would treat with possible new cases or successive waves of COVID-19 that may come in the future. Your assessments of the requirements, the processes, the safety for monitoring projects, for visits, meetings, and consider remote working wherever possible. And again, the 2 slides back where we would have spoken to remotely managing a team, all of those factors will come into that. So from there, you're looking at your capacity and your site readiness. You need to make some decisions concerning your pace of restarting or commencement, of your projects. And this should match the capacity that is currently available within your organization and the readiness of the organization for those restarts. You're looking at your physical access arrangements in light of social distancing, reduction of personnel on site, but also in an environment where you may have reduced support from other third sector organizations and third parties, which may also be affected by COVID-19 or may be stretched within this environment. And you're looking at clear and explicit confirmation to restart the project from the sponsor, and that you have confirmation of the capacity as well as capability, again, the legal analysis that we would have looked at when we were slowing down and stopping a project, and making sure that you resolve all of those legal issues before you start. And then you're also looking at prioritization. So we're looking at this within a business continuity environment. So you're concentrating on those ones that are most urgent, the ones that are most needed in order to keep your business afloat. And you're prioritizing your resources and your capacities, as well as any other constraints that you're going to need. You're prioritizing that in order to make sure that you have the most viable and the most important ones going forward that are safe. You have the capacity available in hand as well. So we've looked at analyzing the risk of how you determine whether to hold the project, move forward, stop altogether. Where you're looking to stop or to slow down your project, how you analyze those risks. We've looked at some quick strategies for restarting as well as protecting your project. And we've looked at the framework for restarting your projects if you've come to a complete stop altogether, and how do you restart those projects safely. So now we're going to look at how can you identify business opportunities within the COVID-19 environment. And I know this may start very strange, and that's why I started off the discussion at the very beginning by looking at risk. And there are 2 elements of risk. There being the negative risk and there being a positive risk. The positive risk being an opportunity. And it's not that we're looking to take opportunity, we're not looking to take advantage of the persons that are negatively affected by the situation. But what we're looking at is how we can innovate and how we can change and improve. And as Mike Moore said, with every great tragedy comes opportunity for great triumph. So within this context, we're going to be looking at how we can possibly improve in our business operations within the COVID-19 environment. So one of the first things you can look at is Porter's 5 forces analysis. And this is looking at the framework for analyzing your organization's competitive environment using 5 forces. So this is the number of competitors and their ability to undercut your, number of competitors and their ability to undercut within the COVID-19 environment, the ease and force of new entrants coming into the market, how easily suppliers can drive up the cost of inputs, the availability of your consumers to drive prices downwards, and how easily goods or services can be substituted. Now, all these factors come together and then help you to guide a corporate strategy to increase your competitive advantage and try to remain in business within this challenging time. One of the other things you can do is a SWOT analysis of where you are within your business, within your projects and your current environment. So within that, you're looking at the strengths of the business. And this is going to be unique for every organization, for every project. So you're generally looking at things your business is doing well. And in particular, you want to look at within the COVID-19 environment, how things are going right now, as we have all of these measures in place within COVID-19. How is your projects, how is your business functions responding? What qualities are in place that are differentiating you from your competitors? And what internal resource capabilities you have. You may have skills within your human resources that are being underutilized within this point in time that you could take advantage of. Similarly, you may have assets, whether it's intellectual property, capital, proprietary technology, processes, systems in place that you may be able to use to your advantage during this point in time as well. You may also look at what are the weaknesses for your organization. So these are the areas within your organization that your businesses or your processes need improvement. You may also want to look at what out there are your competitors doing better than you at this point in time. Examining your own internal resource capabilities and limitations, and how clear is your selling proposition. Now, your strengths and your weaknesses are all internal factors. So these are factors within your organization. And then you have factors external to your organization that you also want to look at. So the external factors you want to explore are your opportunities. So what external opportunities are there in the environment that you can take advantage for your business or for your projects? Are there any underserved or emerging markets or consumers out there that you can possibly now try to serve? Are there a few competitors in the area or a specific target segment of the market that you can take advantage of? And what positive media coverage are you having out there? Similarly, in the external factors, you want to look at the threats. So what are the obstacles out there externally to your business and your projects that may impact your success? Are there any new emerging strong competitors out there? Are there any changes in the regulatory environment that may negatively affect you? Are you getting any negative media coverage? Or is there any change in customer attitudes or spending patterns or demographics that's going to be affecting your organization and your projects? When you've analyzed all four of these factors, you now need to now tie these in together. So with your strengths, you're looking to see how you can leverage your strengths to minimize the threats to your organization. With your opportunities, you're now looking to see how you can take advantage of these opportunities and in the process, counter any weaknesses that you have. And of course, you want to make sure that you look at how you can use your strengths to capitalize on your opportunities, because these are the strongest areas and the strongest areas for growth for your organization. But you also need to see how you can protect your organization as well too. So you want to look at your weaknesses and how you can build on those weaknesses to defend against any potential threats that you would have identified. So looking at all of these areas, your SWOT analysis, forces by forces, and there are a number of other theoretical models that you can use to analyze your business functions. You can then have a better idea of how you can change your business strategies to capitalize on the business opportunities as the business environment has changed with COVID-19. So we're going to look at a few examples of what some persons have done within the Caribbean region. So with COVID-19 and with restrictions on social distance, it's been a growing demand for the convenient delivery of services and a more personalized services. So for example, in Barbados, Chefette Restaurants Limited, and Chefette is a homegrown fast food empire similar to what Royal Castle may be for Trinidad. And a primary competitor is KFC. And KFC would have already had a delivery service in Barbados. But what Chefette did in this scenario is that they launched a massive fleet and completely changed their business model to compete aggressively for island-wide delivery delivery service that by far surpasses anything that's offered on the island, because their delivery service is not just limited within the geographic realms of where the individual outlets are, but they've expanded it island-wide. So wherever you are within Barbados, you can call, and rather than waiting for customers to come to the outlets, they're now delivering island-wide. So they're bringing everything to you. So it was in this case, it's a heavy capital investment, maybe not so much a happy capital investment, but definitely a heavy capital investment that they would have used to make sure that they remain viable in this particular point in time, and it dramatically changed how they're moving forward. You can also look at virtual services and how technology allows you to use opportunities to expand and not only your delivery, but your market reach. So Salsamology Dance Academy in Trinidad and Tobago, what they've done is that they've launched online classes, and they did this in the height of the COVID-19 restrictions. And they did this on a platform that complemented what they already had in place. So when you think about dance classes, now traditionally you think about going to a dance studio where you will partner up with persons and you will have in-person classes. And they do provide that. But what they've done now is that they have launched this online forum where they're providing live dance classes. So they're getting that direct one-on-one live feedback from the customers as they're going through classes. And everything can be done remotely for registering for the classes, for the payments, and they have a number of virtual chat rooms and forums for communication. And I've looked at it, I've looked at some of the videos, and it's excellent. I was a past student for theirs for a while as well too, but I wouldn't want to put in one disclaimer, and that my inability to dance right now is not due to their quality of their tuition. It's just simply due to the fact that I have two left feet that I'm just born with, that just has not changed as well. But it's an excellent forum and an excellent example to see how they would have expanded their market, so they're not just limited by their geographic capabilities, they're not limited by the measures in place within Trinidad. So they are now getting a wider reach of persons, not only across the country, Trinidad and Tobago, but they can now expand their reach throughout the entire Caribbean, where anywhere else in the world persons can sign up for these dance classes. So they've taken this scenario and expanded to dramatically expand their reach internationally as well. You can also look at how some places have used their ability to capitalize on underutilized capacity. And this is one of those examples I was speaking about corporate social responsibility. So what Angostura Holdings Limited did was that they utilized their ability to produce pharmaceutical grade alcohol to make hand sanitizer. And they did this at a point in time in which it was in desperate short supply within Trinidad. And Angostura did this as corporate social responsibility, meaning that they donated everything that they produced. They made it very clear that they were not going into competition with their downstream suppliers who also make hand sanitizer, but they recognized that there was a need for this, a very strong social need for this at this point in time. And they recognized that they had the capacity to meet that need, and that their ability to meet that need can mean the difference between life and death and the multiple persons who are infected at that point in time. And they rose to the occasion and they donated 70,000 bottles to first responders, communities, and businesses. Now, this was an excellent example of corporate social responsibility. And earlier I spoke about how you can look at what you're doing out there in the community and the environment and focusing perhaps on areas where it's needed the most. Now, although they would have done this in terms of giving back to the community, now you can imagine how, if they were looking at the other way in terms of profit, how this would have been a potential game changer for them. But organizations similarly can look at this in terms of what capacity they have within their operations and see how they can utilize that capacity in order to capitalize on some possible business opportunities. You can also look at how you can improve on your customer service, delivery, your customer interactions. So the licensing authority again, now this is government. All of the examples I've spoken about have been private sector, and they have dramatically improved in their customer service interactions by launching an online appointment system. What this allows you to do is, rather than going down in person, having the crowds and stuff like that, it allows you to maintain social distance, it allows you to reduce your wait time. Although they may have not revamped their internal processes significantly, it still significantly improves on the customer service in terms of your have a set time, and persons that I've known have been in and out within half an hour in terms of a lot of the transactions that they've been able to achieve. Now, arguably, there's still a lot more room to go. So, for example, Barbados has gone a step further in terms of now you can actually renew your driver's license online and pay online. But this definitely is a step in the right direction. And the transport division is not the only area within the public sector that this has been done. So digital appointment systems have been launched in a number of other areas. And you're seeing gradual improvements in a number of areas in terms of being able to apply and receive documents and services that you need online, virtually, as opposed to having to go out in person. Now, within our own organizations, we may not be able to have the capital to dramatically launch a new fleet. We may not have the additional capacity to launch a new product line or other things like that. But within each of our organizations, I am sure there are ways that all of us can look and see how we can improve our business processes and our efficiency, especially within our projects. So this is an opportunity that we can use to critically evaluate our internal business processes and eliminate or improve on our unproductive efficiencies and our unproductive activities. Now, one of the things I can definitely say that I personally have been glad in regards to the restrictions that are in place in terms of COVID-19 is the amount of time that I have spent in meetings before compared to now that has been completely unproductive, and the meetings that we're having now are a lot more productive moving forward. And that's just one area of your business. So look at the amount of time that you are actually being able to gain that you can now put towards more productive activities. And if we examine other areas of our operations and see how we can similarly gather other improvements, I'm sure we can find ways that we can dramatically improve not only our business operations, but also the effectiveness of our projects moving forward. So that brings me to the end of our presentation for today. And with that, I would like to say thank you, and I would like to open the door for any questions or comments that you may have at this point in time.
Vaughn, thank you for handing over. I'm trying to battle the inclement weather on my side with the audio. Your presentation, sir, was very gripping, informative. As I said before, jovially, I did not even blink. Thank you for really imparting this content in a dynamic presentation style. I think your presentation really speaks to at the ground what is happening in terms of organizations, both at the private and public sector, how they must reorient and rethink their business model in order to be sustainable and viable for the months and years ahead as they work towards meeting their business outcomes. You know, certainly COVID-19 is an acute risk which has reshaped the project portfolio and business operations of companies across the board, right? And at this point in time, whilst they embrace the challenges, right, they are also responding in innovative ways, right, to the changes in the macro environment. And I particularly like your case study approach at the end here that shows us, you know, on the ground what is taking place. I'm sure, given your active work profile, you are quite agile and nimble on your feet. So I know you can dance salsa. I think you pull one there. I know you are quite nimble and agile on your feet. I saw the figurehead graphic from the matrix there. I haven't told you that you can't decline meetings, and I hope you're watching and so on, because I try to politely decline, you know, and you tell me, have I told you you can't decline meetings? You are working from home, you're always available. Right?
Yes,
You are not like a Max, you are always on duty.
Very much so. Very much
Yeah,
so.
very much so, very much so. So thanks again. I would like to open the virtual floor for questions. And we have quite a few questions coming in. And Vaughn, you know, in our preparation discussion, I told you I'm going to ask you two very challenging questions and so on as the moderator, you know? Right. First question coming in from Ms. Teresa Frederick, who's a faculty member here at the college, our procurement specialist rather at the college. First question coming in, are there any negative procurement impacts due to COVID? Right? What are the negative impacts on procurement brought about by the COVID trigger? And how do you think companies and so forth are responding to these negative impacts on procurement in particular?
All right, sorry, Nigel. I think I missed the middle of your question. I had some degradation there just now. Can you repeat it again?
Sure. COVID has definitely impacted all functional areas of the business. The particular question coming in from Ms. Frederick, what are the negative impacts on procurement brought about by the COVID situation? And how are companies responding to these negative impacts on procurement? And right. she gives a framing for the question in terms of direct relevance to the Public Sector Procurement Act, which was assented to in January 2015 in Trinidad and Tobago.
All right, so for the client organization, with regards to projects, one of the most significant impacts that they have is in terms of the availability of suppliers and vendors and the narrowing of the vendor fields. As I mentioned in the presentation, they may need to look at alternate suppliers and possibly even stockpiling. In the wider scheme of procurement, what persons may need to do within the COVID-19 environment is some of the factors that they use for evaluating their vendors may possibly need to be expanded to include the risk for COVID-19 in terms of evaluating what measures the vendor has in place to ensure continued business continuity. Because you may engage a vendor at this point in time, and 2 months down the line, they may be adversely affected and not able to deliver on what they're provided. So increasing that level of analysis to reduce the risk and making sure that your vendors and suppliers within your procurement process have also considered that. So you're pushing your risk management down your supply chain as well and engaging your vendors in those discussions as part of your decision for procurement as well. You may also want to consider how you engage. So as opposed to engaging one vendor for something, you may want to spread risk in terms of possibly having more than one vendor supplying for the same thing. So if one vendor is adversely affected, then you have also engaged another vendor. So you may want to reduce the size of the packages that you are sending out and reduce the scope that you're sending to particular vendors, and therefore engage multiple vendors as a means of possibly reducing your overall risk at that point in time.
Thanks, Vaughn. Some practical strategies shared there. So more questions coming in, also from Ms. Frederick. COVID-19 has affected business organizations of various size and scope. What advice do we have for small restaurants with less persons passing through? So I think we are narrowing on the small business sector, micro and small businesses. How do you think they are responding? In particular, Ryan, she's asking about restaurants.
Right. Now, within Trinidad and Tobago, most of our workforce, unfortunately, are working in areas that are going to be significantly affected by reduction in consumer spending. And small restaurants in particular are some of those areas that are going to be adversely and significantly affected with significant drop-offs in revenue, challenges in terms of even being able to pay their workforce and possibly having to reduce staff, reduce working hours, etc. One of the ways in which they can possibly look at doing that is in terms of changing the business model. possibly delivery services, possibly looking at companies within the closer regions or closer areas that maybe be able to provide lunch services for as a packaged bulk service. So you're minimizing that level of contact, but you're possibly expanding your reach. We've seen where a lot of companies have introduced measures with curbside pickups where they may not have had that before. So any option that minimizes the amount of impact or interaction persons will need in order to still fulfill that service of getting their service from your organization is definitely a positive moving forward here. But also looking at other markets, other niche markets that you may also be able to serve. So I saw, for example, one person in the US, they would have ended up closing their restaurant after about 10 years in service. But what happened when they closed their restaurant is that they also had a very, very small delivery, catering, specialized ordering service. And the shortfall that they got when they closed the restaurant, what they found was that they had a huge increase in that niche market, which was very small at the point in time, expanded dramatically in terms of that personalized delivery service that would have been there before, now became their main avenue or main area of business. So in terms of challenges now, it's all about right now financial prudence, being lean, dropping off excess wherever possible, considerations for your customers during difficult periods, but also looking at your flexibility and ways that you can possibly innovate in any means, form, or possible that you can leverage whatever capacities you have within your organization, or possible capacities in order to generate business or expand your business. And understanding again that COVID-19 is affecting everyone and seeing how you can put measures in place to protect not only your staff, but your customers alike, and making sure that those measures are transparent, that you can build that confidence moving forward.
Thanks, Vaughn. I particularly like your case study with respect to personalized delivery in Barbados. And we can attest to a lot of small restaurants in Trinidad and Tobago, just to build on Teresa's question, are responding in similar ways with curbside pickup. PriceSmart has recently launched, PriceSmart Trinidad and Tobago that is, has recently launched their curbside pickup with a high degree of success. Just yesterday evening, I can impart to the team here that I had this craving for hot fried wings. And you can't refuse wings and so on. I did not want to come in to PriceSmart. And my cousin imparted to me this app, a particular app, for the food drop app, right? So you can go to PriceSmart online. You can pay for the hot fried wings. I paid for 36 wings. I'm that type of guy, right? On PriceSmart's website. And I was able to rally the food drop app and their network of drivers to go to PriceSmart and pick up the item and drop it at my home. And it was still hot. So, you know, this is how companies are becoming very innovative and are responding to the challenge, right? By capitalizing on these opportunities, right? And offering a service to particular niche markets. So I was particularly happy when you brought up that case study in Barbados there.
I think one of the things that we're going to see moving forward is that we're not going to go back to business as it was before, given what we've been exposed to and how organizations have to adapt. I think the consumer market is going to be demanding a lot more personalized and a lot more convenient at home or at office services moving forward. So I think we are seeing the beginnings of a trend that's going to continue even past COVID-19 recovery, where persons are going to continue to demand that level of personalized experience.
Yeah, I think so, definitely. Vaughn, I think there are a lot of intermediaries that might be trimmed, right, in a much more lean fashion, bringing companies closer to the market. So forcing companies to be more service-centric, right, and customer-driven, right, in many respects, not only in the private sector, but also in the public service sector. As you alluded to in Barbados, you can renew your driver's permit online, right? And same with that Trinidad and Tobago's Vehicle Association is making a similar headway as well. And I'm glad you brought it up because it brings me to my question. Do you think, my personal question that is, and this is the question I want to put you on spot with, right? Do you think that these models, these new models are sustainable, right? Post-COVID, let's say hypothetically that COVID alleviates 9 months from now, 1 year from now. Do you think that these niche companies, these revisions in business strategies, these new operating frameworks are sustainable? Are they going to become the new normal, right, for both public sector and private sector? And I say that in reference to a policy decision that was taken with the Ministry of Public Administration, where an additional portfolio of digitization was added, right, to the Ministry of Public Administration right here in Trinidad and Tobago, headed by the Honorable Alison West. So do you think, from your standpoint, from where you sit, based on your experience, based on the interaction, right, do you think that these models are sustainable? Or are they only for a COVID period?
Most definitely sustainable. So take, for example, what has been done with the licensing authority. This was introduced in the midst of COVID-19, but this has been the norm in Canada for the last 10, 15 years. That's their way of life. And it's like that throughout their civil service in terms of the public sector services that you engage. Now, there's some things that cannot be replaced. So for example, that in-house dining experience, you're not going to get the same effect virtually in terms of going out and ordering food. So, I mean, some elements will still remain, but that demand for the personalized service, that demand for the convenience, which has been pressed to the forefront out of the need for safety in COVID-19, I think that is now going to be a permanent chasing consumers in terms of that level of convenience and that time-saving capability. And it kind of begs the question in a lot of areas, why wasn't this being done before? So we're being forced to innovate in ways in order to survive. But those level of innovations is what drives society and drives businesses and keep businesses afloat. So although in some cases, we're not going to go to a totally complete digital format. There's still going to be the place for in-person services, in-person goods, etc., in-person experiences. I definitely think that virtual environment, that online experience, that that convenience, that time-saving capacity of getting it remotely, at home, at the office, wherever you are, I think that is definitely here to stay. And I think coming out of this, that we're going to see a lot more innovation and new businesses and new evolutions coming out in terms of a number of ways in which we conduct business and do other things within society as well.
Definitely, Vaughan, definitely, Vaughan. I concur. As we look towards the floor for questions, I have one question coming in from Mr. Wesley Bridgemohan Singh. How do you think, or do you think rather, the responses to COVID vary between the private and public sectors? And do you see the need for a partnering approach between the public and the private sector?
Well, I think in a lot of ways, private sector is driven by the public sector who would have set policy and set the example. And in some cases, as we were seeing, have had to put laws in place in terms of mandate certain response, as we would have had recently with the mandatory wearing of masks within public. Now, there's some private sector organizations that are leading out there in the forefront. And not only in COVID-19 response, but also in terms of the business environment. They are constantly looking at researching and trying to see what is the best way of doing things forward. But I always advocate that the best approach is always a partnered approach, where you get the best of both worlds, because you get the public sector driving, and within that they will pull the masses. But then you also get the private sector, which also may be able to lead and pioneer in certain ways that the public sector may not necessarily, the government may not necessarily be able to. So my answer to that is, I definitely believe that partnering approach and a collaborative approach is definitely the best way forward moving forward.
Yeah, thanks, Mon. I certainly agree. there's a need here for greater communication and stakeholder alliances. I think the opportunities are phenomenal, right, with that partnering approach between the private and the public sector there. Vaughan, I know is fast approaching lunchtime, right? And I know you're thinking about the wings I just mentioned there, right?
You got that right. I'm thinking about where can I possibly get wings for lunch. Thank you, Nigel.
Yes. You know, whilst we cannot deliver any personal wings at this point in time, you know, as a token of our appreciation here, through a live session live on our YouTube channel, I would like to thank you, sir, right, for being part of our webinar series here this afternoon, and for your ever-embracing way to participate and your willingness to participate and your flawless execution here this afternoon. So it is with great Cipriani humility and professional fortitude, I would like to say thank you and a heartfelt appreciation from the Cipriani team for your input and active discussion here this afternoon.
Thank you, Nigel. It's definitely been my pleasure to be here. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
You're very welcome, sir. At this point in time, let's open up the floor for any questions. No questions at this point in time. Please feel free to post questions on the YouTube channel window to the right of your screen, right? The recorded video will be posted very shortly. Please feel free to like the video as well. Share the video as many times as possible. I know our IT team will place the webinar feedback link for this session, right, on the message window. Please feel free to offer us feedback, right, on this particular session. With no more questions, Vaughan and the entire team, I would now like to enter the closing remarks and vote of thanks, right, for our 5th session here this afternoon and our season finale, right? Our season finale here at CCLCS Live Project Management Webinar Series. Firstly, I would like to thank all the presenters who would have presented for all 5 sessions, session 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 over the past 2 months, 2.5 months. You guys have been very willing and very enthusiastic to participate in this series and impart useful project management strategies to help us optimize our projects crafted at the individual level, at the community level, at the employer level, across all sectors. I am sure as we return to our workplaces, as we return to our respective communities, as we embark on our individual projects, these strategies will be very useful for us. So a heartfelt thank you. Within the next week or so, I'm going to execute some appreciation letters and so on to all the presenters, so you can add to your PDUs as you renew your PMP qualifications. And that's a PMP joke there, Vaughan. I know I got you with that one, right? In order of appearances, I would just like to itemize all the presenters. Session 1, we had Mr. Wesley Bridgemohan Singh and Ms. Teresa Frederick. Session 2, we had Ms. Teresa Frederick again and Mr. Akindele Lobi. Session 3, our procurement team, we had Ms. Teresa Frederick. Our 4th session, we had the esteemed presence of Ms. Glynis Alexander Tam, the current president, Vaughan, of PMI SEC for the region, as well as Dr. John Lewis, right, who's the director of ICT at the Office of the Honorable Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. And our 5th session here, we had the esteemed presence of Mr. Vaughan Halliday, an esteemed facilities management and project management professional in the local and Caribbean fraternities. I particularly would like to mention our mutual colleague, Ms. Cynthia Hayes, for introducing me to these diverse presenters, of particular you, Vaughan, as well as Glynis, as well as Dr. John Lewis. So thank you, Ms. Hayes, as well, yeah, for this networking. And there's great potential, right, in the process of networking and stakeholder alliances. So Vaughan, I will send you some emails and so on. Welcome to the Cipriani team and the community. And I'm hoping that you can be an active voice here at the college as we retool our curriculum within the spirit of student enrollment and imparting, the project management skill set to not only project managers alike, but to business professionals. I'm sure you would agree with me when I say that project management is the 8th wonder of the world. And there's no longer a reserved skill. Don't ask me what is the first 7 wonders. It is it is no longer a practitioner skill set. It is a required skill set of all business professionals, just like leadership, communication skills. So that was our inside joke here. I would like to thank our IT team, Mr. Antonio Armstrong, and the entire IT department for their support throughout the series. I've been WhatsApping, emailing, Skyping, and so on over the past 2 months there. And just like a doctor to their patients, Antonio and the entire IT team has been very supportive of this endeavor. I would also like to say a heartfelt thank you to our marketing and stakeholder department for their timeliness, for their active marketing messages right towards this exercise, for imparting onto us marketing strategies to boost the participant level across all 5 sessions, right? So thank you to the stakeholder marketing team. I would like to thank the director, right, directors of the college, right, and all internal stakeholders of the college for their support, right, through this project management webinar series and the continued support, right, for new initiatives from the project management department and the wider Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies. I can safely say the 5th installment was a great success, synonymous to all 4 sessions, right, that were held previously. So please feel free to like the videos on YouTube, share the videos, right? It's very important. Please feel free to contact us at PRM online at cclcs.edu.tt. We are in the process of active academic enrollment, right? Due to the COVID-19 constraint, we have responded as a learning institution, right, with online registration, online classes, right? Even our standard programs from certificate to bachelor's degree have gone online for semester 1 of the new academic year. So please feel free to contact us at PRM online at cclcs.edu.tt. Follow us on all platforms, social media, web platforms, right? As we continue to work together, right, to build a Cipriani project management community. I thank you and good afternoon.